Used to give me supper in a $5 bill, sitting with the buds on the windowsill. I wish I could.
Good afternoon. My name is Bahmani Yazdanfar, and this is Turnaround, a weekly program brought to you by my colleague John Hardy and I to discuss different aspects and elements of the behavior of the mankind and human being when it comes to interaction with each other, whether it is in the private setting or in an organization or workplace. In the last 2 weeks, John and I focused on discussing of the habits of our habits, our mankind habit, human habits, and how these habits takes place and how they manifest themselves when it comes to dealing with others. This week we are going to again going a little bit one layer deeper, and we discuss about how these habits takes place and how we are able to at least change it, and how long it takes to get rid of habit or create habits. John?
Yes.
What do you think about that? Do you want to get rid of any of your habits? For instance, that smile of yours is start to diminish since we start, so that is a good sign that you are getting rid of that habit, but apparently the trigger is still there.
The trigger is still there.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, I think that's. I completely support your initiative.
Which is?
I'm still trying to remember it.
So, anyhow, you remember we were talking about 2 sessions ago about the habits, and then we discussed last week about how people try to get away from ignoring their actual senses without studying further, and then jump over the loop and try to find a new age to find so-called spirituality or answer to their demise. Or to the So these two is at the end of the last show, we came to the sort of the rather flaky conclusion that people try to not focus on things that is more difficult to answer and try to that.
Exactly. So, I think I'm coming with an even newer insight.
And what is that?
It's coming to me now.
From the
from the ether,
like a different dimensions,
from the fog.
Okay.
For me, it's just a fog.
Okay.
I'd like to think it's another dimension.
So maybe
it's
it's just a cloud.
It's a cloud, and when it clears, I all of a sudden have something to share.
Okay.
And when it doesn't clear, then it's life as it usually presents itself. What I started to think is that there's a kind of social contract that we have. You know, this sort of noble lie that Plato talks about, but it's not so noble. And basically it's to say, be with the group, be in the herd, or else. And the thing about this is that, in the past, this would have been explicit, in the Middle Ages and the ancient times, it was very explicit.
Like a tribal kind of thing.
Tribal, yeah. You did something, you deviated, that was it. They noticed it, you're in trouble. And so you immediately knew that any kind of deviation would take, to the point where, if you're going to deviate at that point, then you better make it good, because the penalty would be so great. Whereas now...
But it hasn't changed anything.
Well,
it's
it
the same.
Hasn't. But the thing about it is it's not explicit, it's implicit, and that's the cleverness. So that what happens is that the inmates are policing themselves. So here we are, everybody is essentially experiencing themselves to be an individual. Like you gave the example earlier before the show, we were talking about teenagers who wish to express themselves, but then what do they do when they're expressing themselves is they join one group or another which has a very highly defined set of expressions, like, goth. All the goth look a particular way. I mean, just imagine if you wanted to be original and join the goth group, then you would wear purple or white instead of black. Then you would really be an authentic individual. You wouldn't last long within that group. But
probably you're not even admitted to that group.
Well, yeah, it would be a short tenure. And or you start the purple goth group, and then there'll be the oppressiveness of purple. So this is the other thing, is that the people who then stand out and actually express themselves, it's almost like they either create their own cult, their own mini group, or if they are, let's say, the philosopher or the true outsider, they're really in a difficult position because they don't want to create their own cult. They don't want to buy into the existing cult. So now they're alone.
You're truly a good example of
which is an untenable position because let's say, okay, even in our society we can sort of be in that position, but it's still very difficult. But let's just say you're in the prison, and you're thrown into prison, and then there's these various gangs. And basically there's one gang or another that you have to belong to, otherwise if you're alone you're basically done. So sooner or later you have to choose one of the gangs, right?
Or die.
Or die.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Not necessarily physically, but mentally you just...
Well, probably physically too if you don't join. But so what happens then is that the moment I think that we get into this idea of we're starting to think and we start to do all these things and we have this notion that we want to understand, we want to be free. I remember seeing this in Hungary, when the end of communism and capitalism comes in, etc., and free market.
I'm sorry, you see it in Hungary?
In Hungary.
Oh, Hungary. Yeah.
Right, when the Comic-Con, 89, 90,
yeah, 90,
came down,
yes,
right?
I was there 90.
So I'm there, and essentially what freedom meant to them, and I remember talking to a taxi driver, he basically said, look, over here, the amount of time that it takes to work to actually get a Sony television takes you 6 months. If you're in Germany, you can do that in
1 month.
1 month. And if in the States, it would be half a month or whatever it was, right? That essentially was for him what freedom meant. In other words, life was easier. The idea was that the average person could work less and get more. That basically equated to freedom to him, right?
Okay.
So what ends up happening is that it's not freedom that people want for the most part. It's to live well with little work.
In comparison again.
No, to wherever they are.
Yes.
Right? And so when they're presented with true freedom, it's not something that they actually desired. It's more that they wish to escape from the specific restriction that they're experiencing at that moment.
Yes.
Expecting that is. And so really for the most part, and this is what makes it so easy to manage people, is that they like to be in prison. They just don't want to be in this prison, so they distract them so they can be in a more comfortable prison. But by and large, most people...
They want to be managed.
Want to be managed and are happy to be in prison so long as they're properly taken care of. Or not even properly, taken care of in a way that is better than they're presently taken care of. That's it. So they'll exchange one prison for another, for another, for another. To actually be free, to actually reach the place of, their own potential, right?
Mm-hmm.
It seems like that's the contract that's made when you come into this world. It's like, okay, if you want to reach this spiritual position, then you're going to have to go through hell. And the hell being that now you're going to have to refuse the deal and you're going to take everything upon yourself.
And then you start from scratch and you
Exactly. And essentially you've got one of those two deals. You either take this road or that road. And the thing about it is, and I don't even know if it's choice, I think it's by nature. But I think that once you're on either, the road less traveled, that Scott Peck talks about, that's the spiritual path. Hard road, and yet for the people who take it, they can't even imagine another.
Do you believe human being in nature, by nature, is lazy a beast, a lazy species?
That was Schopenhauer's basic premise. The philosophy literally started as that is his opening position. The human being is lazy. And ultimately it's that, if we take a look at commerce or anything, if I can get something by doing, using X amount of work, why am I going to do 2X to get the same thing? So basically, I'm always looking to conserve, get the most for the least. For the most part, certainly that's the economy.
Even technology, more large number of this gadget that we have, it's toward to make our life easier than it's supposed to be. For instance, a very simple. I vividly remember when I was a child, we used to get up and go and change the channel of TV. Now you have a remote, and now you have a remote, and now you have a wireless remote, and all of that. What I'm saying is, this is all of the technology. I mean, human beings are working extra hard to have extra comfort, or become more lazy.
Ultimately. And then even too, when we wish to maintain our physical condition, we look for ways to do it quickly and easily. And if we can do it through a pill rather than exercise, then we will. So ultimately, I mean, we're looking to do less and less and less. Exactly.
And when we are talking about the workplace, if we are these creatures, we are the creatures of the habit of comfort. How it's I mean, I can imagine, at least in the governmental jobs or the people who work for the city or provincial government or federal government, they are working extra hard, especially through the union, to get a better bargain, more money, less amount of the time to work, less amount of the responsibility. And even there was a news, for instance, a couple of weeks ago that they had number of the city employees that they use their position to just take advantage of the extra vacation time, extra sickness time, or even so we know this is part of the human being. Now,
well, part. But there was a proviso here. It's one aspect of the human being, right?
Yeah, yes, that is what I'm trying to say.
It's not the whole of the human being.
If we are going to work that hard, to make future life easier, why not focusing on the present?
What do you mean?
For instance, if I'm going to spend, let's say, 5 days to organize something, let's say at home or office or whatever, in order to move these cups, instead of going from around the table, go and take it from here easily, why not just go around the table every time and save that 5 days?
Well, I mean, we would if we could.
No. What I'm saying is, generally speaking, people, the way that I see, if you look at the window right now, people are running to try to make better life. But at the present time, they're running. They're working extra hard.
I would say that what makes them run is the fear of falling behind rather than being ahead. I would say for the majority, it's basically the fear of falling behind.
Fear of loss.
Fear of loss, and not just loss.
Loss of time, or money, or
beyond that,
bills, or whatever.
Beyond that, it's just like, for instance, if you're in a town and everybody's living their life and everything's fine, and then all of a sudden, now all around you, people are starting to, let's just say, join this network marketing scheme, let's just say.
Yeah.
And one after another starts to make money, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now all of a sudden, your life, which was just standing still, is now perceived as behind, because it's behind those around you.
Mm-hmm.
So people essentially are not defined by themselves, they're defined by the group. Whatever the people around them are doing. So if the people around them are doing better, they're doing worse. And so they have to run to catch up. And so one of the things that's cleverly done by the big machine is to make everybody feel that if I don't keep running, I'm going to fall behind.
So it is some sort of false competitiveness.
Yeah. Well, I would say it's an induced competitiveness. And I would say that, okay, when we say people are a number of things. I mean, it was interesting, like Le Bon, who was talking about the crowd. In the 19th century, wrote about the crowd. And he talked about how the human being is essentially a herd animal, and that how once they got into the crowd, the crowd took on one mind. But he pointed out that generally speaking, and this is what's misunderstood very often about this crowd psychology, is he said that on the one hand, yes, it could certainly be led to, to things which are far more atrocious than most individuals would ever embark on their own. And the case that the case study for him was the French Revolution and all the barbarism that took place. And they kept upping the ante of horror, right? Similar thing happened in the Second World War and probably all wars. But he also pointed out that this same crowd also could be directed towards things which are more virtuous and braver than the individual would normally undertake onto themselves. And it had to do with who was directing the crowd, right? And to what end. And so I think this is one of the things that's key. Yes, it's a given that the crowd is the crowd and we're oriented towards the crowd. But even within human nature, the individual, for instance, each individual has actually that spark within them. The only problem is that the vast majority of them are so, especially, by I don't even know what age, maybe 7, 8, even earlier now, they're so blind to it that for almost all intents and purposes, it's not even there. They're just robotic. But beneath that robotic, within that robot, And for instance, you can see it, let's say you go to even the most robotic place in the world, right? Where people are crowded together, like, you know, wherever it be, Mumbai or anywhere. And you'll see a father with his son, let's just say playing. At the moment that you're actually watching this person engaged in this particular event, no, he's not a member of the crowd. He's himself. He's connecting directly with his little boy. So what's happening is that the potential always remains. And I think this is what the horror of the game is, to me, is that it reduces people into these just robotic slaves. That's exactly what it does.
I give you a good example of that. Just about, it was last year in Afghanistan, in Kabul, a woman that who allegedly tore Quran or something like that.
Yeah.
Or allegedly, I don't know. A mob of the people who didn't know her beat her to the death and then burned her dead body in the daylight.
No, which is completely consistent with
No,
you know, crowd behavior.
and one would question what went on in their mind. I can understand what went to the mind of the victim. I can understand that she was fearful, she was afraid, and she saw the death. But what was going on? What we are doing? What we are going to
I would
achieve?
say the short answer is nothing. It's as if what would have happened is that crowd, once they got into the crowd, would pick up the energy of the vibration of that emotion.
Yes.
That emotion is rage. Once they engaged in rage, all thinking is cut off. And that's it. They basically are like, you know, like a rabid dog or something like that. That's just it. They're just going forward, and they will keep going until that. Essentially, they'll keep going as long as they have energy.
Yes, and that is why I'm saying after even the woman died, they took her body and burned it.
Well,
and
no, because they still had energy.
Still they have the energy.
More energy,
and that is a good segue about to go to the issue of the mindfulness of the individuals when they get to the crowd, or as well as versus when they are alone. Because if you, as we discussed, because we are nature of we are creature of our own habits.
Right.
And if this habit is either induced or learned, or it is in our DNA, and we have the habit of picking up certain sort of the extreme emotion or energy out of the emotion, while we see others in the form of being recognized, or being form of the not being outsider, or being accomplishing something without thinking, it is nevertheless is a habit, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean,
because it's like cops or it's like gangsters. If they are alone, they are very benign individuals. As soon as they get in group, they become completely different kind of
because they become
beast,
activists.
because they have the audience kind of thing.
Not just that. I think it's something else. I think that first of all, this is what makes us like a wolf or anything like that. It makes us a pack animal, right? So that we have an actual social instinct. This social instinct makes us naturally, most of us, with the exception of the outsider to a large extent, but to a degree, even them, harmonize with the field of the group, the energy field of the group. So whatever the group is experiencing, I'll give you an example. I mean, I'm an outsider by any definition, and yet I remember being at a football game, and it was Alouettes versus Montreal versus Toronto, and this is, I was maybe, this must have been 40 years ago. Didn't go to many football games. My father wasn't too into football, so the three of us go to this one token football, so he's done it once,
You mean football, American football, or
American football?
Okay.
So we're sitting there, and I remember Sonny Wade was the quarterback. He was one of the better players in the league, was the quarterback for the Alouettes at that time. And the crowd just starts chanting, "Kill Wade, kill Wade," right? And all I remember was my father just knocked me and said, "What are you doing?" I had joined the chant, "Kill Wade, kill Wade," and I only became...
Oh, you were, without even knowing...
Exactly, and I only became conscious when he knocked me.
Okay.
So in other words, what's happened is you're there, The crowd's doing it. You're drawn in. You don't even know what you're saying. Are they literally thinking about, picturing killing Wade? No. But the problem is that all you'd have to do is take that energy and then just redirect it. You've got that crowd in that state, and then you correct it to something that happens, and boom, it could actually turn into something else. It's that simple, right?
But like any, I mean, even
And it
if
just
you,
creeps upon you.
if you look at even the law of the physics, if you have a piece of rock here,
Yeah.
although it has some sort of the inertia, but you have to pick it up and throw it to get that movement going. So when you are talking about crowd, it has to have the igniting point. Who does the igniting point?
Well, no, that has to do with...
No, not all of the crowd just telepathically just start to do that. Someone starts something, and then there is a followers.
Okay, there's an example of that. I was just thinking where it was in, I think, For Whom the Bells Toll by Hemingway. And he's describing a scene.
Which one was that?
That's in the Spanish Civil War.
Oh, no,
right?
I haven't.
And there's a scene where they're in the town, and each town is basically being cleared out by one group or the other, the partisans or the fascists, right? So here the partisans come into a town and they look for the fascists. And one of the characters was this young man who used to dress up like a toreador. He wasn't a toreador, but he was a complete poser, right? So anyways, there was a gauntlet that was set up, whereby all these people lined up, and with clubs they were going to beat the people, the fascists who were coming through, right? So all these peasants are lined up to do the beating, and the first person goes through, and then the comment is I was having a hard time inducing them to do it because they just weren't in the mood for it. I mean, they didn't specifically see these people, didn't catch them red-handed, etc. And then as first person, second person goes through, when it came to this young man who was the toreador, he was particularly cowardly in going through the gauntlet, right? And then somehow this set off the crowd, and they got into a frenzy and just beat him to death. And then the next person who
But there is always one person that does the first beating.
It's not even first person. You don't even know that. It's just that there was an event here, right? This is going on, but there was an event that just sets it off. And once it's set, boom, it just went. And so they didn't even know it. It's not like it was planned that it would go that way. They were having a hard time making it go. But I think it's it's just like with the fire, right? You keep throwing the gasoline at the fire, sooner or later it will go. Now, that's the crowd going once. Now, obviously, if you've got a crowd doing this over and over again, they're already primed. Because when this same crowd is going to go to the next village and the next village, it's going to take less and less to get them to that point, right? They're going to become habituated to it. And I think also the thing too is there becomes a collective necessity for denial. Because if anybody at any moment were to actually become fully aware as they're beating this person, they would have to stop. Right?
Yes, but there is something that does not let them. There is no thinking then.
Well, yeah, but also there's this thing that you don't want to, because there's a kind of an innate realization that if I do realize this, right? If I do recognize this, then what, right? Because it's just like,
Which comes back to original thing you said.
Well, the original thinking.
People don't want to think.
But let's just say you even take a philosopher and you're throwing this person into a war situation, right? Say the two of us, we're original thinkers, etc. The thing about it is, once we get into, let's just say, a battle, it's a pitched battle, and it's trenches, you're going back and forth. What are we really doing is we're not even representing an ideology. We've got a bunch of people around us who are our friends. The people on the other side are our enemies. And by and large, whether we're philosophers or whether we're just, sort of like the village idiot, we basically are in the same position. That these are the friends, these are the enemies, let's get on with it. Because there is nothing else to do, right? Life becomes incredibly simple at that moment.
Or without choice.
Well, I mean, there is no
without
other
options.
There isn't a real option because exactly at that point the other person's doing it. He's going to be, so you have to essentially defend yourself. So now you're in it. But once you're in it, even that philosopher will become part of that mob, and we will be capable of all kinds of that behavior because the trip switch is being turned. And once we're in that mode, that lower part of ourselves, we're no different than anybody else. Even the thinking person becomes exactly like everybody else on that level.
Actually, on the I saw yesterday or today. I think yesterday, I was going through a couple of my accounts, social media accounts. I noticed that someone posted the footage of the. I think it was in United States. I'm not sure. The video showing a van and a police car.
Yeah.
So that means whoever is videoing, that means another police car with a dash cam or something. And this van is tripped, go to the ditch,
Yeah.
turn over, and the driver thrown out.
Yeah.
Out of the van. Van was completely smashed. All in the camera, you could see that. And the person who was, the driver or whoever that is thrown out of the van, was unconscious. Then three or four cops, patrol car or cruiser stopped, and about 6, 7, or 8 cops came out, police officers came out, and all of a sudden, all 7, 8 of them go and kick the guy without even checking if he's alive or not, if he's. But that was interesting that you brought this group. And these 8 police officers, let's say if it was 8 or 7, they were in 3 different cars. So when they get out of the car, there was no time to discuss with each other, or there was no actual leader that
there was no plan. Exactly.
So all 6 of them or 7 of them, with the same mentality, went there. And even the ones that they could not pass through the other cops that they are begging, go around and kick the guy or beat the guy.
And I'm just thinking that what that relates to is, I'm just thinking that exactly. So what happens is, what do we try to do? We try to hold these people responsible. We look at their training. We do all kinds of bullshit like that, right?
And yet the core nature of the human...
No, it's not just that. I would say that the real problem now becomes a much more difficult problem, because to even address this individually or as a group or even isolate them is useless because of the fact that this is just response, right? We have to actually end up looking at the entire environment within which they're working at that point, right? What is it that primes them? Because these people are already going there primed. They're already in a state, in other words, the cup is full for them to do that. Mm-hmm. That means that they are just on the verge of homicidal rage all the time. That means they must be going at home and doing the same thing with their wives. We'll expect this behavior is endemic, which then we have to ask, well, what are the conditions in general that they're working in? There's got to be a huge problem there, and that has to be changed. But that's not, what will be discussed. What will end up happening is they're going to end up looking for procedures.
Cross-cultural training.
Or something stupid, because I think part of it is because this level of understanding is just above almost the pay grade of the individuals who are actually engaging with this. They don't want to engage with this problem.
Well, when I see the scenes like that, one of the things comes to my mind, because it's not the first video I saw like that. It happened in Toronto, it happened in other cities in Canada, as well as in the United States, even more severely. And I know one of the things that main things that comes to my mind whenever I see this disturbing videos is, I think, because I am trying to feel, or I'm trying to understand, to get to the head of the person who is a cop, and I am chasing a bad guy.
Yeah.
Okay? And I am chasing him, and it is my job. Nevertheless, I'm getting paid, and I'm getting paid good for that anyhow. Yeah. It's much better than every other sector. And I'm going there, and the guy is thrown out of the car, for instance, in this scenario, or hit a post or something. So we know that the guy is injured, and he's not going anywhere, or sitting there. And we know there is no gun or anything like that. What I'm trying to figure it out. What goes to the head of that police officer that gets out, take his button or taser, and beat the guy that is.
To me, it must be a combination of fear and rage.
Well, that is why I want to clarify that.
Sure.
Those things are human nature.
Yeah.
I understand that.
Yeah.
But exactly what's going on in the head of that police officer, I was always thought, at least guess, that maybe the guy is, while he's chasing that guy, he's thinking, if I get him, I will beat the shit out of him while he's driving it, because that bad guy interrupted his peaceful day. I don't think this process of the getting off and beating someone is spontaneous. I think it takes a time to mentally to be prepared for that.
Yeah, I'm just wondering. Okay, so
in this part, I mean, I can understand if you come to attack me and I spontaneously attack back.
Yeah.
That I understand.
No, it's not a reflex. You're right.
Yeah.
They're already primed. They're getting out of the car with that intention.
Yeah, either they are in the car or while they are driving, it gets to the point they are tired of the guy. They're taking them for the ride or something.
Well, which it means too that it must be like, I'll go, okay, what do I read from this? War mentality, us versus them. So tribal war mentality where these people from another tribe
are no good.
And they're objects at this point.
Yes.
He's not looking at individual, he's just looking at a representative of a group of, of villains who are essentially, like almost like in Star Wars, the enemy robot.
Yes.
He's got about that much empathy for that individual at that point, right?
Yes. Go ahead. No,
okay, so now he's basically killing a robot as far as he's concerned. And it's a malevolent robot that would have, in his mind, killed him, and I'm guessing, if it had the chance, right?
Yes, but historically, when you are dealing with the tribes, like at the time of the Romans and going to the barbarians, the Saxons, and all of that, they were going after land and the spoil of the war. But in the case of the, let's say, police officers going versus, or the mob going, just one mob going, there is no personal gain over there.
No, but it's not. But I think that they're in a mode of a tribal mode, us versus them. And that they, and I think a lot of this is a fear response, is that the police are terrified. The police are completely terrified, and at the same time they're supposed to be police, and therefore they shouldn't be afraid. And so this is a kind of compensation for the fear. Now, and like an example of this was, I remember having a conversation with a policeman on the subway, just asking him, because he was a trainer, and just asking him about these latest cases where, somebody basically comes at them with a knife from like 10 feet, 12 feet, and they shoot him dead or something like that. Remember?
Sami Yatim was, and exactly. 8, 9 shooting while all of the other cops are standing there.
Okay,
yes.
So then, because I said in the past they didn't do this. If somebody was closer, this was not what happened. And he said that the police are trained to actually shoot if the person gets within, some distance that was, seemed quite large, let's say 10 feet or whatever it was. They're actually trained to shoot. Like, and he said, and not for the legs either.
Oh, no, that is other thing. That is other thing.
And so this is the whole point, that what you've got essentially now is fear. Because this is no longer, you've got, let's say, 10 policemen, you've got one guy with a gun. So this is really, actually what this is mass cowardice, is what we're really dealing with. That's what it is. It's somehow passing itself off as courage to be a policeman. But now we really get the situation where the individual doesn't want to take any risk whatsoever.
Individual being that police officer.
Yeah. Because and it's also, it's an interesting kind of sort of approach, because I was just thinking about this morning, is that the whole idea of battle, that what makes you brave as a fighter is essentially the idea that there was a battle and it was relatively equal, and that you bested the other person, but you could have died too, right?
Well, look, go back to the wars that Julius Caesar had, going to the battlefield, and even the legions, even if the other party had more legions of the soldiers, at the end they came home, whether they won or they defeated. They always said there was a good battle. We did that, because it was a sword. It was 1 versus 1 or 1 versus 2.
At the end of the day, there was risk.
It was risk involved, and both parties knew the risk. That is the difference between the battlefield. That is why the troops. That is why, generally speaking, when you respect, you want to put extra respect to the army rather than police officers in the city, is that reason, because troops go and fight with the equal or a
but
support.
not even equal, because I mean, when we take a look at, even
not now. These days they are shooting rockets from 1,000 miles.
and this is the thing, is that we look to ennoble, and this is what's very interesting. Exactly, we're ennobling the policemen. We ennoble the fighters.
Look at the show they put. If one of their kind died, 5,000 police officers walk. I think it is just a show to force fit people that we are united.
Well, yeah. No. What is? It's interesting. Somebody who I know, who's he's a character. He's certainly brave, but he's borderline insane, but more of a masochist. He actually demonstrated at the police funeral. He
demonstrated. What do you mean by
he demonstrated? He, with a placard, he went and he demonstrated at the police funeral for the fellow who was run over by the runaway snowplow, right?
Oh yes, I remember that. Yeah.
And he went and demonstrated, and 6 police set upon him and beat the shit out of him.
Demonstrated like that. Why you are
with a placard? Why are we making such a big deal, brother?
Yeah.
So they just beat the hell out of him, and then he decided to become an anti-Muslim activist, right? Mm-hmm. But the thing was that now it's like,
so he always
but every time now he goes out and he does this thing, it's almost like the police now come and like, oh, you again.
So they have it's well known by the police. No,
he's spending so much. It's sort of like known criminals are getting out in months. He's spending so much time in jail. It's incredible.
But this phenomenon is not just in Toronto or in Canada.
Oh no, it's everywhere.
All over. I remember when I was even in Middle East. The police department didn't have much of respect because of this kind of the behaviors.
But but there was something that changed. Like I remember growing up, the police, how they looked, the way they were. There was a completely different feeling that we had. Okay, I was younger too, you're a child, but still, there was something different about the police. They were a very, very different force, the police, than they are today. And I was thinking that one of the things that was a big change for me was that the G10 or whatever. What was the one where we had the big? Was it G20?
G20, yes.
Yeah, and we had that thing, and then the police ended up going around with the riot gear, and then they ended up arresting a bunch of people.
We had about 25,000, 26,000 demonstrators. We had about 24,000 police officers. I mean, that is ridiculous.
No, exactly. But the thing was, and it cost, what, $1 billion? And
who knows where the money gone.
Now, but the thing about that whole thing was, remember, there was an incident where they just rounded up people. They basically
the cattle,
cattle kept them. They
on the corner of the center of the Queen and the Spadina. Yes, in the middle of the rain.
In the middle of the rain, they did all of that, right? Mm. Now the whole thing is that I just can't imagine 40 years ago anything even remotely like that having been possible. Something has changed. Something is very different.
You alluded on the issue of the fear factor, that it's prevalent these days, and it's becoming more and more. I mean, let me just say again, maybe it is a little bit of the distant scenario, but for instance, if you know that I have a political show here, that it's after our show, and I send invitation to elected officials, and they don't respond, They don't even, most of them, they don't even respond to a simple invitation email.
Right.
Why? You don't know. They are elected officials. They get the tax money. They are supposed to represent people. Just simply say, I don't come. Nobody hold you responsible of your choices.
Well, no, the bar just keeps going down and down.
So it's going down and down. It's not. So when you see that kind of the scenario, for instance, from that, I'm just using that scenario, not necessarily the issue of the police and public, but when you see that scenario, you see, the only reason a person doesn't respond is because he or she is afraid of the disclosing something that is sinister, or hiding something. Otherwise, I don't see any reason that if you ask me, hey, let's go to have a coffee, I say I don't want to. Well, I mean,
or you know what? Or they just feel that no, they don't feel the obligation. They can't be bothered. It doesn't fit their agenda.
Even if they don't fit agenda, as a public servant, they have to respond all of the inquiries.
But I think that again is just part of the the ignoble lie. What do you mean public servant? These people do not feel like
that is exactly my point.
They're not our servants in the least.
That is my point. That is why I used a little bit distant example. If those people, they refuse to, or they don't see it is part of their obligation to just respond to an email inquiry to a media guy like me, it's not a big media, that's fine, but nevertheless, there is a media. It is a broadcast, there is a TV, there is a show, and it is being broadcasted. So if what you expect from the people who are getting, for instance, the budget of the Police of Toronto, just recent budget was over $1 billion. And
one would think we're in a war zone.
And if you look at them and if you take a picture of the police officer today and go and compare with the 40 years ago that you are talking about, 40 years ago, the guy coming out with a loose pants, a t-shirt, walking on the street.
No, but the thing was, it wasn't so loose pants. No, they were properly dressed and everything. But they didn't have, for instance, flak jackets.
No, they were not loose pants in a not tidy. No.
I thought you meant.
No. I mean, they were very loose in appearance. They were very friendly. You could go and talk to them.
Oh yeah, exactly.
These days, if you see them, you are afraid to say to make a statement.
When I saw the first example of this was when I was in Hungary, and I was
not scared of beating you, but scared of how they react.
And I was thinking about 1989. I was in Hungary, right? And for the first time, I encountered a police force that was not a protecting force, right? It was from a communist country. Mm-hmm. It represented the state, and they were an oppressive force, and they looked the part. They looked like thugs. They looked like almost a caricature of the the Southern sheriff type of mentality.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the worst version of it. They were fat. They were out of shape. They were surly. They were corrupt. They were just awful, right? And then they put them in new uniforms. In the transition, as if this would make a difference, right?
Oh yes,
exactly. But one thing that I found was the interesting part was that as much as that was sort of a complete wake up. Then later on, I started to see that, okay, no, we don't look like that. But in terms of the notion of the policeman being a protector, which was completely our experience when we were growing up, no, I do not see the policeman that way anymore. Absolutely not. I see them as compliance officers who are representatives of the state. Right?
And the government is specifically members of the government.
Totally. I mean, this is
not even a state. It's just government.
This is what they've become, and so that they're it's like
I think to serve
slow slide.
Protect is to serve the government and protect ourselves.
And protect their interest.
Yeah, or
protect the status quo. And this whole thing was being gradual. But I think now we've got to a point where it's just clearly that's what it looks like. Well, an example too. I was thinking about it. How much did it cost the government, the city of Toronto, to get flak jackets for the parking officers? Now, for heaven's sakes, the parking officers, what are they? I mean, just constantly on the verge.
They have cars, they have flak jackets, and by the way, they have the emblem of the police.
So that now they're elevated to.
So that means I don't know why they put it there, but my assumption is the reason they put that because there was a couple of incidents a few years back that a couple of people they get in the altercation with the police officer for the parking ticket. They said, okay, now if you get to the altercation, you are assaulting police officer probably. I don't know how.
Also, what happened was that the number of parking officers, the aggressiveness of which they're chasing after getting parking revenue.
Oh, they have a quota the same as the police.
No, exactly. And so what started to happen is that once again, it's like more policing, more control, and it's just insidious. It's everywhere. And you know, with the taxation and the harmonized taxes and everything like that. So finally, what ends up happening is that the individual is being told by people like Justin Trudeau, who's this benign, you know, this you know, you can't even find words to describe him.
Happy-go-lucky prime.
All the best I can say him is he's a guy with a script. That's the best one can, you know, possibly
and not
say.
A good script.
I mean, whoever wrote the script doesn't have it. Yeah, or maybe that's the best he's capable of delivering. But anyways, so he's a guy with a script. So he's just there making us feel that this
us, you mean
us? Yes,
most of
us in the prison. Basically, at least the warden's nice. You know, that's basically it. That the warden really likes us
and
wishes us well.
So when it comes back to the individuals, let's say that police, I am pretty sure they are humans. I mean, they are first of all, let me rephrase that. They are human, but I am pretty sure many of them don't like what they are doing, like any other job.
Which politicians?
No, police people.
Well, the
policemen.
So,
if they put them under pressure to do certain things, because many of them may be religious people, many of them may be moral people, maybe many of them maybe when they started the job, they had a noble idea of serve and protecting the people, but they end up to be, and maybe many of them they just getting because of the six-figure income, hoping to get a six-figure income.
Well,
but
exactly.
the point is.
Yes.
Among those people, there are certain group, small or large, that they are not happy with the status quo from perspective of their job description and job condition.
I would think the majority. Actually who become policemen, right, would actually prefer to be protectors rather than compliance officers, right?
Yeah,
genuine protectors.
Yeah.
I would imagine it's the majority. But the thing what exactly happens is that certain minority ends up like the players.
So you create that crowd mentality.
And they'll have the game there.
Yeah.
Sure. Because it's like, once again, the minority, another example of the game. So that let's just say you want to have a police force that's oppressive, then what you're going to have is that small group of oppressive police. Those are the ones who you're going to let, you know, come to the fore. They're going to become your sort of the ones who are more equal than the others. And then they will start to wrap around the people around themselves who are very compliant and obedient to them. And then the whole thing will skew. And as it skews, it'll just keep skewing that way. Yeah, exactly.
Again, we come back to that social orientation that you were talking about, circular square pattern, which is having these three general.
Right, like in the police, you're not going to get. Actually, you'll get a few outsiders. I mean, imagine.
We had the guy who the chief, the deputy chief that spoke about just present his idea just a month ago in a speech that he was giving somewhere that was invited. He just gave his opinion that police department could save some money by doing certain things. Immediately the next day, he was not at job. It was announced that he's going to a vacation that he hasn't used or something like that, and I didn't follow up. I don't know what's happened.
There's an example of the game. You know, evidence of the game when that happens is that what you have now is this, you know, the players are at the top, then you've got the alpha troopers who are going to be the ones who will take that rule and make it absolute. And doesn't matter what it is, they're not going to look into its morality. They're going to say, we're police and we just adhere to the law because that's what they love, that type of individual. And then you get the players, you wrap them the next tier you wrap around with those people, the sort of the border guard or prison guard mentality, and then
you have a few
and then once you've got that locked, you basically now move the whole, and it starts to go that way. And of course, what will start to happen is that as the police force will change, as the nature of it changes, those people who will be attracted to it will be a different kind of person.
Of course,
and then it will become self-fulfilling.
Because they are applying for those kind of the
because now they
mentality.
will see it as that, so that it'll attract its own. It'll be, it'll be like attracts like.
Well, we were talking about the habits which we end up to the crowd mentality and habit. When I was study, as I mentioned a few shows back, that I studied psychology and psychotherapy to some extent as part of my training individually and as part of my curriculum when I was in university. There was a positive reinforcement. You heard about that, you know that about that, and that creates that habit. I mean, you need some sort of
behavioral conditioning.
Yes, you need a stimuli, generally speaking, or they call it trigger or something.
Yeah.
And you get the stimuli, and then you approach to a certain behavior to feel good about it. Either if, for instance, if you are sad about something, people, not all people, but many people, they just go to bar and start drinking to feel good about that, because they want to get rid of the bad trigger that they had. And then because they feel good about that, the next time this thing happens, they repeat it, and that become a habit.
Well, yeah, it's not that they felt good, but at least it basically numbed the pain, and therefore they had a positive response.
Still, in comparison, it feels good because
they reduce the pain.
Reduce the pain. Now, if you're feeling good, it's not necessarily I am happy because I am doing that. It's just getting rid of that trigger or the consequences of trigger.
Getting away from the pain.
And this goes alongside, if it is police officer, or if it is politician, or if it is normal, or even teenager. You mentioned about teenager being grow. These days they have this gadget, this iPhone thing, and as soon as
like the gizmo,
the gizmo, and as soon as the text comes, it's like they are CEO of the company and they have immediately to answer that. That is because of the same principle of the, let's say, they see a stimuli or trigger and then they immediately answer to feel good, to get it off the mind.
And this is and the game basically uses this.
The game uses, and those players you are talking about, they are using these fundamental
exact dynamic
behavior and dynamic of the human being to put them in that prison of the city.
Since the beginning of time.
Since the beginning of time. Although there is a solution for that.
Sure, there always was.
And always been. And that was the mindfulness that people use it loosely these days, I mean. And that is, mindfulness is nothing but as soon as you engage in a trigger, that stimuli, before applying a behavior, question it.
Okay, but that is
a
huge step.
I understand that is why last week we were talking about that. We are not even exploring the senses that we have, or the logic that we have. We just jumping over the hoop, trying to find the answer why we are here and what we do here and because we have certain tools that we haven't even explored individually.
Oh no, we have everything that we need. Exactly. We don't need, anything other than what we basically were born with to do just about everything.
I mean, we were talking about that police officer and the shooting. The moment you want that shoot, if you just for a split second, you don't need minute or two to contemplate. Ask very simple question: what I am getting out of this shooting? That simple as that.
Yeah, but that's not how we live.
Oh, that is what I'm saying. It's not. That is what I'm saying. It's not just isolated to police officers. Every one of us, or most of us at least,
but I think there's
doing
another,
that on a daily basis.
No, but there's another reason for that too, and that is that I think within our brain, what we do is we reduce things down to habitual subroutines naturally, because actual full conscious thinking is extremely laborious, right? It takes a lot of energy.
Of course it is laborious.
But therefore, what the brain has learned to do naturally is to reduce things down to habit, to subroutine, because it frees itself then up. Because if we didn't do that, we basically would be just obsessed with the most, stupid minutia and just looking at everything like morons all the time. I mean, so we would have made
I think we would be better creature.
Perhaps, but I mean, but the thing about it is, and maybe the Cro-Magnons looked like that. That's what they looked like. But the thing is that as the brain develops, you have this the ability to, break things, subroutine, then you can actually free yourself up to deal with higher function, just like a company. Basically becomes specialized, and you pass something off to a lower employee, then you go off, you free yourself for decisions. That's exactly what's taking place. But that's not a bad process in and of itself.
But I challenge you on that, in a part, and that part is, if we were like that minutia and looking at everything, if we do that, we come up with a rather or better or more logical answer, and we get rid of that and go with another gadget or another thing. Therefore, that, like the companies that you said, they set it up and set the system and let it run, then our brain is trained to finish one item, finish with their answer, put it aside on the shelf somewhere in our subconscious or conscious, and move on. So later on, that become a habit too.
But the person, let's just say, who is, let's just say, let's just say it's the Dalai Lama. I don't know. I'm saying someone who's incredibly mindful. I mean, he's not going to bring his...
Dalai Lama is mindful?
I presume. Maybe let's just say that we'll be given the benefit of the doubt that he's fairly mindful. So then he's going to have all these activities he's going to engage in during the day, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, if he's going to be mindful of every single thing that he's doing, it literally would exhaust the brain to such an extent that you just would be exhausted. Like, what I'm just saying is, our brain was not designed to be 24/7 in that mindfulness state. We just couldn't do it.
That is the part that I am challenging that, because after a while, I agree that part. What I'm saying is, you don't have to be, after a while you do that. The brain does that automatically without you consciously be mindful. The exhaustion of the brain being 24/7 involved in the mindfulness when you use the conscience constantly to learn the new habit. But when
you're still focusing it. Like an example, it's like even if I'm being mindful of something, right, which is taking a lot of energy.
Okay.
I'm mindful of this particular thing where the spotlight is, but in the meantime, all these other functions are going on. Because if I'm going to be mindful, I can't be mindful of everything at once. I have to narrow my focus.
That is my point. That is my point. You narrow your focus in one thing, but as soon as you finish with that...
It's 2 minutes to go.
How many? 2 minutes, okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chris. As soon as you finish with one thing, you can move on to other thing. And that one thing can be registered in your brain, and you don't have to think about it the next time you approach to that.
Well, I mean, that effectively does happen. The only thing that
But apparently it does not, because people keep repeating the same mistake over and over.
But the thing
or it's the same habit over and over again.
What mindfulness, though, is returning, right? It's like, you don't have to be mindful when you're learning something for the first time, right? You're automatically in a mindfulness state because of the fact that it's new. But the moment, once that thing that you've learned, let's just say Tai Chi. I've been teaching Tai Chi to a group of people who are elderly at the condo where I am. So and it's an interesting experience teaching it, because I've been doing it for so long, for 25 years, that it's semi-automatic for me. So it's very difficult for me to perceive how difficult each one of these movements is. And even though they look like nothing, they actually are quite difficult, as I'm noticing. But what's happening is that when I'm doing it now, okay, I have to be mindful, because I have to now go back from unconscious competence, go all the way back and then explain them and break it down, right? That's mindfulness. However, what they're doing, because they're learning it for the first time, that is just learning. And I think, but one thing that's crucial is that with mindfulness, you're going back, which is what we normally wouldn't do. So it's like, okay, I learned Tai Chi, I get this feeling down, right? And this is why Tai Chi is such a mindfulness practice, is because you learn it at a certain level, but you keep going back, and you keep going back. So that is the practice of the mindfulness. Whereas, you take a look at most tennis players, right? Except for the pros, where you'll watch them, they'll make mistakes, and then all of a sudden they'll just go and they'll do that stroke, let's say a tennis player, and they'll go right back to the basic stroke. That's mindfulness, right? He's going all the way back to the basics because it's not working, okay? But the average tennis player, you know, it's not working, he'll do whatever, but he won't have that capacity to go back to the original place. And it's this whole process of being able to return back that is mindfulness, and that's where the real use is, to re-examine that which we think we already know. That's where mindfulness
even
comes
if
in.
you want to use this analogy of the tennis player, for instance, that you get the difference between pro, when it comes to the department like police officer, that they're supposed to be pro, so they should act like a pro.
Oh no, but exactly.
But they don't. They are acting like amateurs, while they say they are in the position, a professional position of doing professional job.
Well, I mean, we call them, but it's
no. What I'm saying, what
exactly.
they claim.
You get the exceptional, exactly. And even within that, it's just like if you look at all tennis players, regardless of what they should be, if you look at all tennis players, yes, you've got this small percentage of professionals who have that capacity. But if we were to look at all police officers, absolutely. I mean, if we were to look at the elite force, the SWAT teams, and all these special things, probably we'd have a much higher degree of that kind of capacity within those ones than, let's just say, the average policeman. But any population, as a crowd, it'll only be a very small percentage who's even capable of mindfulness, and that's the problem.
So we go back to that 97%.
Can we come back down to exactly the philosopher's position? Exactly. After all this time, we went nowhere as usual.
We didn't get anywhere, folks. That
once again,
that will
unresolved.
Be continued. That will be continued. And the next time I am challenging you earlier on, so see, probably we get you some answers, useful answers out of it.
For a change.
So thank you for being with us this Tuesday, March 8, 2016. Please tune in next week, same place, same time. Thank you and good night.
Got my city, got my sin, got my baby, I'm rolling in. Well, she's gone on high. I know she's lost, she's gonna die. Used to give me supper in a $5 bill, sitting with the birds on the windowsill. I wish I could fly away. Trying to find, sail on high. Oh, where you been now before I die? All the little seeds